Today we are doing a live webinar on hypnosis, hypnotherapy, and its applications in coaching and psychotherapy. And today we have with us the founder of ICHARS, which is the Institute of Clinical Hypnosis and Related Sciences, Mr. Nitin Shah. And I am Nisha Jangiani, the founder of Mind Wellness Therapy. And we are both practicing clinical hypnotherapists, and we are here to take all of your questions today on your thoughts about what you would like to know about hypnosis, hypnotherapy, and how it applies to different schools of psychotherapy as well as coaching. So let's get started with some questions.
Sure.
Nitin, can you tell us a little bit more about hypnosis and then hypnotherapy and the difference between the two?
Okay, so let me put it this way. Hypnosis can be understood as a process in a state. So let me first help you understand what do I mean by state. As a state, it's a state of hypersuggestibility. That's the technical definition. What does it really mean? It basically means that you are in touch with your unconscious and you are able to impress upon your unconscious things that you would like the unconscious to do. A more simplistic example would probably be, I'm sure all of us have experienced a situation where in the morning we want to wake up, we put an alarm, the alarm rings. While consciously I want to wake up, in a half sleepy state I put the alarm on snooze, right? And we also have this internal conflict at times where one part of us is telling us wake up and there's another part which is saying 10 minutes more. Ironically, for most people it's the 10 minutes more that wins.
Sure.
And that's where the problem starts. So what this indicates is that consciously I wanted to wake up, I put the alarm, but on an unconscious level, for whatever reasons, I did not want to wake up. And somehow the conscious and the unconscious are not in sync with each other. So while I'm making the decision consciously, the unconscious is not receptive of that decision and therefore is acting against me. Hypnosis will be a process to help you make the unconscious more receptive to your suggestions. Which then means that once I make a decision consciously, and it can be any decision, it could be a decision that I want to wake up in the morning, it could be a decision that I want to study, it could be a decision that I need to do certain things related to marketing, or it could be a decision that I need to just be good to my partner and my boss. Whatever decision I make consciously, how my unconscious can understand the decision, accept the decision and support me in application of the decision. That's where hypnosis comes into play. So I hope that answers your first part of the question of what is hypnosis. Right? Alright. But this is hypnosis as a state.
Correct.
I also mentioned hypnosis as a process or a technique. So any technique that you use to help the person reach this hyper-receptive state, this state of hypersuggestibility, becomes a hypnotic technique. This distinction is extremely important because a lot of times people confuse the two.
Yes.
You will notice a lot of people who criticize hypnosis or who say hypnosis doesn't work, what they're actually talking about is a technique in hypnosis.
Correct.
That one technique of inducing a hypnotic state doesn't work. Which is fair enough. That's the reason why in hypnosis there are so many different techniques. The idea is for a hypnotist to be able to identify the kind of person they are working with, look for a technique that suits that person and then use that technique with that particular person. I have not come across a debate on hypnosis as a state. The reason, if a person, let's say coaching and psychotherapy, if a person comes to you for a coaching or a psychotherapy session, why are they coming to you for a session? Because consciously they want to change.
Right.
Some part of them is not supporting that change, and that's the reason why they are there. So wouldn't it be fair to say that the role of a coach or a therapist is actually to not convince the client's conscious mind, that more or less they are already convinced. It is to convince that part of them which is not letting those conscious decisions to be implemented.
Sure.
And that's where hypnosis comes into play. So as a state, hypnosis is highly effective.
Correct.
As a technique, depends upon a lot of factors. Now coming to hypnotherapy. So to be true, I don't really think there's anything called as hypnotherapy.
Okay.
It's hypnosis plus therapy.
Yeah.
Which means when you are using hypnosis and you are applying it towards therapeutic change, it becomes hypnotherapy. The reason I'm saying that, and why I said that I don't really think there's anything called as hypnotherapy, but it's hypnosis plus therapy. Because you can technically take any therapeutic modality and combine it with hypnosis. And that can be called hypnotherapy. I know of people who have combined CBT and REBT with hypnosis, and they're getting very good results with it. I know of people who classically were practicing psychoanalysis and then they've started incorporating techniques from hypnosis as a part of their psychoanalysis processes, and they're able to get better, faster results. There are also people who would classically use behavioral psychology, where it's more about conditioning and it's more about desensitization and so on. And it's just that they have used the same processes in combination with hypnosis. So, for every therapy technique that exists in hypnosis is actually a therapy technique that's borrowed from other fields. You are just learning to use it in combination with hypnosis, thereby making the original fields extremely effective. Why is this important for us to know? Is because hypnosis literally becomes that thread with which you can connect multiple fields of therapy. You could take something as different as a CBT and an art-based therapy, which on the face of it look very different. Both of them work. And many times people wonder how is it that both of them are working while their underlying principles may be different. You don't understand that because you don't understand what these processes are doing in the mind. They're eventually inducing a suggestible state. The moment you understand hypnosis, hypnosis becomes that tool, that thread with which you can connect all of these things together. So, while there is nothing called as hypnotherapy, it's probably the most important skill that a therapist should learn.
I think hypnotherapy, like you rightly mentioned, I would look at it more from the process-based definition that we gave. So basically, in a hypnotic state, whatever techniques you're using, when you turn it into a process, then that I think loosely gets labeled as hypnotherapy.
Correct. But that loosely gets interpreted as hypnotherapy. Correct. As I said, for us, our understanding of hypnosis is more based on state. Because that, if you understand, you realize that the application of hypnosis is immense.
Correct.
We have just discussed about hypnosis in therapy. Obviously, hypnosis can also be applied in coaching as an extension of that. But there are other applications. You are having a conversation with someone, right? You want that person to be more receptive to the idea that you are giving them. Hypnosis. You are into advertisements. You would want people to be more receptive to your advertisements. Hypnosis. You are making a movie. You would want people to be more engaged in that movie. Hypnosis. So the moment you start understanding hypnosis as a state and not as a process, the application is huge. There's practically no area that I have been able to think of where you will not be able to apply hypnosis in some format or the other. Obviously, will you use only hypnosis? As I said, hypnosis is just a state. What you do in that state would depend upon what is the objective you want to create.
And I think it's, people don't realize how commonly occurring it is. So I think one of the common questions I have been asked as a therapist is, oh, but you know, I don't think I can be hypnotized, or I don't think this works. And I always kind of have a good conversation with clients like this and say that it's equivalent of saying that I don't sleep or I don't stay awake, because hypnosis, people, while they have very fancy understandings, and thanks to Hollywood and all the movies, they kind of misunderstand hypnosis as a state, where just as like you're naturally, say, wide awake and this is naturally asleep, hypnosis is a state we're in more than 60% of the time in our day, when we're driving and we're focused on driving and we say miss a turn. Or we're so engrossed in a book or a television and someone's yelled at you from the background and you've completely not heard them. These are so many commonplace examples of us being in hypnosis almost 60 to 70% of our day. What we do in therapy is we use that particular state and prolong it so that we can use the necessary techniques to get the conscious and unconscious in the same.
Perfect. In fact, a good example to understand hypnosis, and people say that I cannot be hypnotized.
Correct.
What they're saying is, I'm not aware of the time when I am hypnotized. And they're two different things. It's like saying that I don't observe my breathing and therefore I don't breathe.
Yeah.
Okay? It's something like that. So, if you have ever been engrossed in anything in your life, if you watched a movie that you were really engaged in, that you were completely engrossed in, you have been in a hypnotic state. If you have ever driven a car, you have been in a hypnotic state. if you have been a part of a lecture where you were completely mesmerized by the speaker, you have been in a hypnotic state.
And the modern lingo for this is if you've ever binge watched on Netflix, trust me, they're using hypnosis to get you going from episode to episode.
Brilliant, and that's actually a very good example of how hypnosis is being applied in our day-to-day life.
True.
So the applications are huge. So just to summarize, to say that people cannot be hypnotized is probably a lack of understanding of what hypnosis is. Again, I agree, not every technique will work with every person. But it's not about the state. The state, if you're able to induce it, will work nonetheless. Are you able to find the right technique or not? Well, that depends upon you as a practitioner, your skill sets and your understanding of the client that you're working with.
Okay. So this is interesting. I think this is a good segue to another question that we've actually gotten coming in, is that is hypnosis scientific? So there's a lot of question about the validity and recognition, and I think in this case we're not debating the state per se, but we're debating the practice and applications of hypnosis. So what is the scientific basis for it, and what's your take on it?
So I'm not going to go into technical descriptions and so on right now, but to answer this simply, search for application of hypnosis in pain management. Researches on hypnosis for pain management, and you will get enough researches on the same. There are medical associations worldwide who have accepted that hypnosis can be very effective for pain management. Now, the reason I'm talking about pain management is because it helps you understand the power of hypnosis. You are saying that with hypnosis you're working on the mind, and by working on the mind you're able to manage pain, which is a physical phenomena.
Correct.
So if you're able to manage the physical phenomena by using hypnosis, which is working on the mind, why wouldn't you be able to work with the mind?
Correct.
So technically speaking, there is enough data actually for hypnosis and its application for therapy, both physical issues and emotional issues and mental issues. It's just that a lot of the data is behind paywall, so it may be difficult to find. But if you actually do the search, there are a lot of researches available on the same. Also, as I said, see, one of the challenges that hypnosis faces is hypnosis is not one technique.
Exactly.
Right? So generally the criticism is, I use hypnosis for anger management, it did not work. Another person uses hypnosis for anger management, it works, and you say because in both cases results were not there. You can't replicate the results and therefore it's not scientific.
Correct.
In reality, when I say I use hypnosis and when someone else says they use hypnosis, we may actually be using completely different techniques in hypnosis. It's like saying that because one particular medicine that is given by a doctor did not work, no other medicine will work with the client.
Correct.
You don't take the validity of medical science based on one medicine, right? Hypnosis is like that. Hypnosis is not one technique, and this is what we want to clarify to a lot of practitioners, psychologists, psychotherapists, coaches, that please don't mistake hypnosis with or hypnotherapy with any other field of therapy, because most fields of therapy have 1, 2 or 3 techniques. And you can actually check alright whether this technique works consistently or not. Hypnosis is not about techniques. Hypnosis is about helping people get into a particular state, and you can come up with 1,000 techniques to do that. So when you say hypnosis doesn't work, probably that technique in hypnosis is not working, and there I would agree with you. But you just need to find a better technique to induce a hypnotic state.
I think that's the common discussion. So what they did in terms of researching with hypnosis is they attempted using scripts. So this is a common phenomenon where they attempt to do research in hypnotherapy or hypnosis using a set script, say for example like for stress management.
Okay.
But that script is played out on an audio tape. Now what people fail to understand is that the presence of the therapist and their ability to be there with the client is actually a huge part of the therapeutic process. And this element has been scientifically researched, where they say more than 40% of what the effectiveness of therapy actually does depend on the therapist and his or her own being. So when they attempt to play a script to different sets of people, each individual will respond differently, and therefore it becomes very hard to quantify that if you're doing a quantitative maybe research.
Which is true, and also to add to that, when you're talking about the role of an individual therapist, there's also the role of the client. See, remember, no two clients are the same, right? They are all different. So there is no way that you can use one hypnotic script with every client. Suggestion in hypnosis is only one process in hypnosis. A major part of hypnosis is actually about interacting with the client in a hypnotic state. And your script, your suggestions, your process actually evolves based on the response that the client is giving you. So there cannot actually be a standard set of instructions that you can give to every person. It changes from people to people. Two people having the exact same issue will be dealt with completely differently when it comes to hypnosis. And the same person having two different issues will probably go through different processes in hypnosis to deal with those issues. So there is a lot more to hypnosis than just asking them to go into that particular state and giving them suggestions. Believe me, inducing a hypnotic state is probably the easier thing. The skill is what you do with the client once the client is in that state.
True.
And that by itself is a huge area of work.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a very, like rightly pointed out, it's a very dynamic process, and it's unique from each client and therapist experience to the other. So, however, we've been doing this for a while, so we can attest to you that from our experiences with our clients that they definitely do see amazing results through a process like this, because it takes every traditional psychotherapy technique that you can imagine and creates more depth and the ability to create lasting changes within individuals. So definitely there is some merit to this, and yes, like Nitin said, if you are interested, please actually do take the time to do some research and look it up, because in the last, I would say, 5 years, the research into hypnosis and a close cousin of it, which we know as NLP or neuro-linguistic programming, is on the rise, and they have used different research techniques to validate how hypnosis and NLP can be used in traditional mainstream therapy techniques.
So just before you ask me another question,
Sure.
just to clarify, please understand hypnosis and NLP both are huge fields, and individual practitioners and their ideas play an important role. So by no means are we saying that everything that a hypnotherapist does or everything that an NLP practitioner does is completely scientific and valid. Some practitioners have obviously come up with experimental processes to work with people, and that's how techniques evolve, right? So I'm completely in agreement with the fact that there are certain ideas in NLP or in hypnosis which may completely be mumbo jumbo. That doesn't mean that the entire field is
Correct.
Something that you could just brush aside. There is a lot in hypnosis and NLP that can add immense value in your personal life and also in your life as a practitioner, both as a coach and a therapist. So I would suggest that please keep that in mind. For all of you who are there who are watching this video right now, if any of you have any questions, please ask those questions in the comments so that we can actually address those questions as we go along.
Yes, and give us a bit of a shout as well, and let us know, your thoughts so far, what we've discussed. And actually, that brings me to a very good segue from what you just mentioned about the different techniques and what people are doing. One of the common questions I get over here when I have conversations with people is, is hypnotherapy about, past life and working with alternative phenomena or energies, and is that how it works? And I'm so curious and interested about that, and is that part of your daily is that part of what you do daily? And this is where I thought I'd throw this question to you, because it's interesting that you mentioned that there's a huge variety of techniques in what hypnosis and hypnotherapy is. So what are your thoughts on this?
Okay, so alright.
I'm guessing you smiled because you faced this yourself.
I have faced this, and I'm also just trying to assess what would be the best way of answering this. So, alright. So when we talk about past life is one technique in hypnosis. As I said, suggestions is one part of the process, past life is another part of the process. There is a lot more that's there in hypnosis. But if I were to just focus on past life for a moment, does this mean that every client who comes to us, we induce them in a hypnotic state and take them to a past life? The answer is no, not necessarily. Does this mean that hypnosis believes in past life? Actually, the answer is no, not necessarily.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, because you have a technique by the name of past life, and I'm, as someone who trains people in hypnosis, and as an extension of that, we also have regression as a part of our training process. I'm saying that it's not necessary that the client is going in a past life. So why is it called past life? So the way regression works, and regression could be when you are taking a client back in past. It could be a past where the client goes back into 10 days back, 6 months back, into the client's childhood, or as some people claim, in their past life. The purpose of regression is that at times we have certain memories which have been repressed, suppressed in our unconscious. Those memories are still influencing us, and they are influencing us because, one, there are emotions associated to that, and second, there's something that we need to learn from those memories that we have not been able to learn from. That learning will probably help us resolve that problem and move ahead in life. Now, when you are trying to assess the cause of a problem, that's one of the areas where regression can be used. So the way it works is you induce the client in a hypnotic state and you ask the client, let's go to the point of entry of this problem or this particular concern that we are working with. Now, in some cases, people go into their childhood memories. Now, there's really no debate over there. It's their childhood memory. So I don't think there's any questions that people have with that. Though you are supposed to have some questions with that. Anyways, when we come back to past life, at times people have a situation where they go into that state, they listen to the question and their mind gives them a story. Let's say a story is that I see myself in a blizzard. I'm all alone. And then all of a sudden the client says, wait, but I've never been to a desert in my life. Now what's happening is the question that is being asked is, what is the source of this particular problem? The mind is giving you a story to help you understand the source. The source contains a story that the client has not experienced in their current life. Now there are two ways of looking at it. One way is that people believe in past life, so they say, well, this is a past life memory. And fair enough, that's their point of view. And from the past life, then they go through those experiences, they learn from that and they're able to apply those learnings in their life. The alternate explanation is, it's like a metaphor, like a dream. You know how at times you ask questions to yourselves and while you're sleeping you see a dream and in a dream you get an answer? Now, is that dream coming from a past life?
Depend on your orientation. Some people might actually say that.
Correct. So actually we don't know. There is a possibility that if past life exists, and I'm not willing to bet my life on that at this point of time, but if I assume that past life exists, then maybe the story that the client is coming from a past life. The dream that they are seeing is coming from a past life. But there is an equally high possibility that it's not a past life. The mind is throwing it up in terms of a metaphor so that you can still understand the story, you can still learn from it. For us as practitioners, it doesn't really matter whether the story is coming from a past life or not. What matters is whether the story helps the client resolve the problem completely. If it helps the client resolve the problem, then whether you want to believe it's a past life or a metaphor or a dream or you want to give any other name to it, that's all fine as long as it resolves the client's problem. If it doesn't resolve the client's problem, then it doesn't really matter whether it was a metaphor or a dream or a past life because it's not served the purpose. So again, to summarize, only because there is a technique called past life regression doesn't necessarily mean that every hypnotist believes in the existence of past life. It's a process. It's a process where the client is coming up with a story that's not happening in their current life, and you could either interpret it as a past life or you could label it as a metaphor. Both equally valid and equally invalid from which point of view you look at. So no, not every hypnosis is past life. And also with past life you have to be kind of careful because it's the buzzword. So a lot of times practitioners use it because it's a way to promote their practice. That, in my opinion, is actually, it's not a good idea. Because you're already framing opinions of people about their problem. They come to you with a preconceived idea, and then your entire therapy is guided with that preconceived idea. So, I know a lot of people who call themselves past life regression therapists. I understand why they claim what they claim, but from a client point of view, I would suggest be careful. Because not every problem that you have comes from a past life. Even in situations that you're going in a past life could simply be a metaphor. But I would leave that to your belief system as to whether you want to believe that to be a past life or a metaphor.
Correct. And I think, Nitin, you bring up a good point because regression is the umbrella it falls under. And as therapists, honestly, even I've had this experience where sometimes you're naturally regressing a client and they jump into what you would either call a past life or, in my viewpoint of looking at it, an alternative scenario. And our line of questioning and the way we process what comes up is still the same. The goal is still to take that experience and help the client either gain some insight on that emotional experience or to create a release process. But the way we would work with that content would still be the same.
Sure.
As for past life, yes, the jury is still out there, take with it as you will, but I will echo what Nitin said, is that as clients, please to be aware. Also do ask the right questions of your therapist. Make sure that they're not just taking you on a past life journey, but they at least have the skill and the ability to address content that may come up from that experience. And I think that's very important to know whether you're...
So from a client point of view, please don't go for a technique, go for resolving a challenge that you have. If you are facing a particular problem, go to a practitioner, go to a therapist and tell them this is the issue that I want to overcome, rather than saying that I want to go through a past life regression. Also, I understand that there are certain people who are very curious and they want to go to a past life regression therapist because they feel I want to find out what was I in my past life.
Yeah.
You know, this is a therapeutic field. It's important work. I don't think you ever go to a doctor, a surgeon, and you tell them, please cut open my stomach because I'm curious to see what is happening in my stomach. So please don't do the same thing with therapies. Don't go and tell the client that I'm curious, or don't go and tell the therapist that I'm curious. And if you go and tell the therapist that you're curious, then it's the therapist's responsibility to help you understand it's not about curiosity, it's about being able to address a particular situation. Or if you're already happy with your life, then tell them what are the additional goals that you want to achieve that you're not able to achieve, and then the therapist can help you reach that goal. Don't really go after the technique. Lastly, before you ask the next question,
Sure.
I said that you should also question regression, and there's a reason for that. When you go through a regression process, and even if you go into a current life memory, that doesn't necessarily mean that the memory is a factually correct memory. Okay? What you experience in a hypnotic state is your subjective reality. The story that was stored in your mind, was it factually correct or incorrect? Well, that's a separate question. In some cases, it may be factually correct. In some cases, there may be distortion, deletion that may have taken place, and it may be factually incorrect. As a therapist, that doesn't really make much of a difference to us. What makes a difference is the fact that there's a story which is interfering with the kind of life you want to live, and therefore we need to work with that story. If it's factually correct, so be it. If it's factually incorrect, then that incorrect story is creating a problem. So we still need to be able to address that incorrect story. Okay? So if I'm not even saying that in regression what memories you recover are factually true, how can I really claim that for us there?
So I guess we leave you with, as the viewer, your own orientation and perception. We're not, like we said, jury is still out there. Please, use your own discernment and discretion. But these are a few pointers I hope that, you could keep in mind the next time you're visiting a therapist or the next time you're curious about this. And I think in line with that, another question that, we've received and I thought was interesting is, what is it like to be in a hypnotic state? So it connects to that with, what kind of experience does a client expect when they are in a hypnotic or state of hypnosis?
Okay, so there are two answers to that. One is, truly in a hypnotic state, many a times you wouldn't even realize you're in a hypnotic state. Like when you're driving, when you're watching a movie, as I said, there are a lot of day-to-day applications of hypnosis. So that's one part of the story. But if you go to a coach or a therapist and you're experiencing a hypnotic state, then what would that experience be like? That experience purely depends upon the objective of the session. Now, classically, it was believed that when you go to a hypnotherapist or a hypnotist, they will guide you into a deep, relaxed state, and you will go into that state where your body will become numb, will become heavy or light, depending upon how your body receives relaxation. The truth is, relaxation is only a result of suggestions that are being given to you. I'm sure if a client comes and tells me that I want to experience excitement, motivation, and confidence about something, I'm not going to guide them into relaxed state. I want this state to be a high energy state. So what would your experience in hypnosis be? Would purely depend upon what is the end objective of the hypnotic session. Yes, that said, most hypnotherapists would use some amount of relaxation to begin with, to be able to help you get into that state. But again, using relaxation is one of the techniques. That's not the only technique. And that actually ties back to what we spoke earlier. That technique is different from the state. For example, if you're working with someone who has anxiety, and if you try to use relaxation as a tool to induce them in a hypnotic state, you are more or less certain that you will fail. Because the moment you use the word relaxation with people who have anxiety issues, the word relaxation for them is a trigger to experience more anxiety. So there you can't be using relaxation, at least the word relaxation as a tool. You can still use relaxation by using a lot of other words without using relaxation. That's okay. So it just depends on what is the end objective that you're trying to create. Hypnosis as a state can be anything that you want it to be. It can be a passive state where you're highly relaxed. It can be an extremely high energy state where you're very excited. It can be a state where the amount of mental activity reduces. It can also be where focused mental activity increases. So it just depends on what you're trying to achieve through it.
And so it's interesting, I get this quite a bit as well from clients sometimes. And this is depending on their own, I guess, physical orientation as well. So sometimes some individuals, in our words, are more visual orientated, some are more auditory based, and some are more kinesthetic based. So in other words, what tends to happen is also every individual's experience in a state of hypnosis will vary. So for some people, they get a lot of visual input. So it's almost like a dreamlike visual state for them. I can personally tell you that I've been in a state of hypnosis and I'm more kinesthetic predisposed. So for me, when I experience someone giving me suggestions, I actually feel it more in my body. So a very common example we use as therapists is walking down a flight of stairs. So someone who's maybe visually more predisposed will get details of what the stairs would be like with lovely handrails and walking down. Someone like me, when I'm in a state of hypnosis, I get some visual image of what the stairway is, but as the hypnotherapist is guiding me, I find myself actually physically moving my legs as if I'm walking down a flight of stairs. Some others who have more of an auditory input and who are more sensitive to sounds, for instance, would in fact experience that same flight of stairs by maybe hearing their footsteps going down, flight of stairs. So basically, the experience is also dependent individual to individual and what they're predisposed to. But basically, as therapists, we tell them is as long as they're able to follow through with our suggestions, as long as they're able to go through the experience, then that is actually what counts. Because I've had this scenario where I couldn't see much. I knew what you were saying, I could experience it, but I couldn't see clearly. Does that mean I was not hypnotized? So, yeah.
That kind of answers the question, and that's actually a good explanation. That also ties back to what we discussed earlier. There is no one hypnotic technique based on the client. You'll have to keep changing the way you speak, the choice of words, the speed at which you're talking, the volume at which you're talking. There's a lot that goes into inducing a hypnotic state. It's just not the script that you're using. Also, depending upon the person, you may want to be direct, you may want to be indirect. So there's like a huge number of variables that you need to learn.
And okay, so talking about learning and how therapists actually can, work with hypnosis and hypnotic state with their clients. So, would you feel? Is there some feedback on our?
Is there some feedback?
Let's go check in. Okay, so I'll ask one more question and then we can look into some of the questions that you sent in as well and then have more of a discussion on that. So I think in view with this, how could your typical mental health professionals like psychologists, psychiatrists, and even more in the mainstream these days, coaches benefit from learning about hypnosis and how they can apply it in their practice?
So for every coach, therapist, eventually you're working with a client who at some point has willingly agreed to come to you for a session, which means consciously they understand they need to create a change, but they are just not able to create that change, which in which ways means that you have to work with their unconscious. I understand when you say that with CBT or with RDBT that you are still working with your conscious awareness. The truth is you are not just working with your conscious awareness. You are with CBT, for example, working with automatic thought patterns. Those automatic thoughts you may be aware of consciously, or you may become aware of consciously, but they are still happening automatically. They are still driven by the unconscious. Similarly, when we talk about beliefs to a large extent for a lot of people are unconscious. There are very few people who are actually aware of their beliefs. So yes, some of the techniques may help you bring the unconscious information up to the awareness. But working with that information and to actually help people resolve the problem is a bit of a challenge. When I say this because I've got a lot of clients who come to me after having been through different talk therapies, different cognitive therapies, so as to say, and they would come and say that it works for us, but it's a struggle. We have to keep fighting with ourselves. And many a times, at some point, people give up. They are like, I can't handle this more than this. I can't keep fighting with myself.
Correct.
Now, what hypnosis does is it actually helps you overcome that internal conflict. And that's where it plays an extremely important role. And that's the reason I said that you can actually combine hypnosis with any field of therapy, and it will give you a really good, effective result. So that's the application of hypnosis in therapy. Plus, hypnosis can be applied with any other therapy. You can be a behavioral therapist. You may want to do systematic desensitization. You may use hypnosis to be able to make it more effective. You may want to use aversion therapy. You can use hypnosis to make aversions more powerful and create that aversion really quickly. You may be a cognitive therapist. You may want to do a thought restructuring where you want the clients to be able to become aware of their thoughts, to be able to change their thoughts. You can use hypnosis for that. You may be a RBT practitioner who wants to help people become aware of their beliefs, not just conscious or unconscious beliefs, be able to change those beliefs in a more non-confrontational way.
Correct.
And hypnosis will come as a very handy tool. So you could be from a psychoanalysis point of view, and you may want to work with people's childhood memories rather than waiting for long sessions over a period of months or years. You could probably use hypnosis to be able to achieve the same results a lot more quickly. So there's a huge application of hypnosis in each of these areas. As far as coaching is concerned, we have had a complete session or webinar on coaching earlier. So I would suggest that please go and watch that webinar. I'll leave a link to this webinar in this live session somewhere in the comments at the end of the session. But just to summarize, as we discussed during that particular webinar, that coaching is more about working with present and future. It's not just about it doesn't work with past and intense negative emotion.
Correct.
But even in future, there are things that you want to do that you're not able to do, which is why you're going to a coach. Now, one way is the coach can act as that external motivator to whom you can go and report, and because you're reporting to them, you feel responsible to fight with yourself and do the things that you need to do. Hypnosis will help you overcome that struggle. So rather than you having to every morning again fight with yourself and tell yourself that I have to go to a gym, while a part of you doesn't want to go to a gym, you are kind of fighting with yourself and taking yourself to a gym. Hypnosis will help you make that process seamless. That the moment you wake up in the morning, there is a natural tendency, a natural desire to go to a gym. You are able to go to the gym, you enjoy the entire process, and because you are able to do it naturally, the chances of relapse reduce drastically. If relapse happens, then in hypnosis that means that there is a positive intention or a secondary gain behind that relapse. There are techniques that you can use to also address that relapse, which then means that the chances of repetitive relapse reduces drastically. So that's some of the application in coaching and therapy.
And I think I echo just one point as you go and explore the other webinar as well, but just from a therapy point of view, that as Nathan mentioned, coaching deals with the present and the future, and you're working towards a more goal-orientated focus. Just bear in mind that with coaching, the issues of past experience and very intense negative emotions or stuck patterns is not necessarily something that is in the domain or scope of coaching.
True.
So just be aware of the difference when you're looking for a practitioner. If you're looking to just focus on goals and achieving specific goals, you know it'd be good for you to work with a coach. But if you're looking to address emotional issues that may be getting in the way of those goals, you'd be better off first visiting a therapist. So leaving you with that thought. And in fact, Nathan, we did get a question in that actually brings a really good point up, and I think this comes into the legalities and the structure around the practice of hypnosis and hypnotherapy, as well as in psychotherapy. So we had a lady, Reshmi Rajesh. So Reshmi wanted to know a bit more about the application of hypnosis with children and related legal issues, if any, with practicing hypnotherapy. So you can start with that, and we can continue in the direction of legal.
Sure. So I'll start with the application of hypnosis with children. So it just depends on what age group of children you are working with. Below the age of 8, generally children are any which way highly suggestible. You just need to be able to create that environment where the child feels understood, where you are able to speak to the child can speak to you. If you are able to do that, you don't really need a separate hypnotic process. The child is already there. Okay? Above the age of 8, because the mental development happens in a particular way, you may want to use hypnosis with those days. But you will not use hypnosis the way we use hypnosis with clients like an adult, because with an adult you are looking at a longer process. At times the session may be as long as 2 hours. With a child, you can't really expect the child to sit in a chair for 2 hours and you're going to take a session with them. So with kids, a lot of hypnotic techniques are more about doing things in a way in which it becomes like a game. Right? So there are quick hypnotic inductions that you learn during the hypnotic training programs, and those inductions can be used with children. Again, the skill is not about inducing them in a hypnotic state. That's actually easy. The idea is what you can do with them once they're in that state. And that's where probably having a good thorough understanding of child psychology becomes extremely important. So if you're planning to work with children, I would suggest that while hypnosis will be a very, very important, useful, powerful complementary tool, please do your research in child psychology, do your research in how to work with child, and then combine that with hypnosis. Also, just to give you an example on how I have used hypnosis with kids, I don't use hypnosis only from the point of view of technique. I understand the process of hypnosis, right? I understand the state that we are helping the child get into. There are times when I've actually played video games with children because video games are as hypnotic as it can be.
Correct.
And while playing a video game, I would then suggest the child certain things which will eventually create the desired change. So, and therefore I said that if you understand the concept of hypnosis as a state, or the application is huge. One such application will be towards kids. Having said that, there are some techniques in hypnosis which I would not recommend to use with kids. Any processes where you are going to work with, let's say regression, childhood memories, maybe the child is still a child. I'm not really sure why would you want to work with childhood memories. And the challenge over there is that the child may not be mature enough to be able to understand the information that comes up. So probably it's easier to work with other hypnotic processes like suggestions or anchoring or maybe even metaphors and stories to be able to help the child create a change. I would really refrain from using any regression based processes with children. I hope that answers the first part of the question. As far as the second part, legality is concerned, so hypnotherapy is not a regulated field as yet in India and in most countries in the world. So there is really no legal regulations per se. That doesn't mean that you can use hypnosis for anything and everything. What it means is everyone can learn hypnosis, but where you apply would depend upon the qualifications that you have. So for example, if you are a coach, since coaching itself is a non-regulated field, you could learn hypnosis, apply hypnosis as a part of your coaching process, and that should be completely fine. There are no legal issues that would come up as long as you remain within the realm of coaching practice. But as far as therapy is concerned, for example, if you are working with someone who has a mental disorder, so as to say, now there are legal restrictions in terms of people who can work with people who have mental disorders. In which case, you can use hypnosis with patients only if you are legally allowed to practice with clients who have mental disorders. So hypnosis is more like an additional skill that you have. Yes, anyone and everyone can learn it, but only in that area it can be applied where you are legally allowed to apply it without having learned hypnosis also.
Yes.
Okay? So if you were to say that I want to use hypnosis for anesthesia, can I use it? Yes, if you are a chemical anesthesiologist and you have learned hypnosis, then you can use hypnosis for anesthesia purpose also. But if you are not an anesthesiologist and you have only done hypnosis, then can you use hypnosis for anesthesia? The answer is no, because legally you are not allowed to practice anesthesia.
Correct.
Okay? So that distinction is very important, that while hypnosis may be non-regulated, the application of hypnosis is governed by what you are legally allowed to practice.
Correct. So I think this brings up a very good point in that if you are visiting a therapist, then a therapist should have primarily the practicing qualifications that are required. So either they may be a trained psychologist, a trained psychiatrist, a trained professional counselor. They need to have these credentials in place. Over and above that, they may have credentials that certify them in hypnotherapy, and that would be, I think, one thing as as people who may be approaching a therapist, something to consider looking out for, because this would still be the minimum requirement legally to be able to practice hypnotherapy, especially since I use the word hypnotherapy specifically if you're using hypnosis for therapeutic purposes. A person should be a trained or qualified therapist first before adding hypnosis to their toolkit. So I think Nathan, since you mentioned a very good point, is hypnotherapy and hypnosis in and of itself is not a regulated field. Do be mindful that practicing it is one thing, in a tradition, in a non-therapeutic format is a separate issue, but as a therapist, having the right qualifications for that would be very important. So
also that keeps coaching out of it. So
yes.
as I said, coaching by itself is not a regulated field. So if you are practicing as a coach, as long as you limit yourself to work with clients or coaches who are coming to you for coaching sessions and they don't really require therapeutic interventions or help, you can practice hypnosis freely. But the moment you come across a person who needs therapeutic help, which means they have intense negative emotions, they have disorders, or they have major traumas coming from childhood, then please refer them to a therapist rather than working with them as a coach.
So, okay, someone's actually asked about the ICHARS course which you offer. So they're interested to know what is the certification that ICHARS gives actually after a full course and what does it allow them to do?
So as I said, legally speaking, these are non-regulated fields. So no certificates by no institute, including ICHARS or any other institute in India or worldwide, really has a legal concern. It's neither legally valid nor legally invalid, okay, to put it correctly. Each institute offers their own certification and so do we. The reason for that certification is for us to know which levels you've completed. So when someone gets in touch with us later on for a cross-check that alright, this is the person who's practicing, who's claiming that they've been trained by you, we are able to verify the credentials and say that yes, you have been trained by us, which is one part of the story. Second, ICHARS has divided its course in two parts. The first 3 levels currently are coaching certifications where you're learning the application of hypnosis and NLP and metaphors towards coaching practices. Now, there are no legal restrictions. We allow anyone and everyone to join us for that particular program, subject to the condition that you are looking at becoming a practitioner. If you are not looking at becoming a coach but you are looking for self-help, then we generally would recommend you to join another course either by another institute or from time to time we also have self-development courses on hypnosis that we may recommend that you can join. But the coach certification program is for people who are seriously looking at becoming practicing coaches. The last 2 levels is where we cover the application of hypnosis in therapy. For that you need to have a background either in psychology or medicines or fields regulated under Ayush, which means Ayurveda, Yoga, Unani, Homeopathy, Siddha. This would be the basic requirement. We allow you to join us even if you're pursuing a course in these areas right now. So we are not really looking at necessarily having someone who has completed their masters. As long as you've enrolled for the masters, for psychology for example or MSW, you will still be able to join us for the level 4 and level 5, but that will be the bare minimum requirement. Our certifications are affiliated to certain international organizations, but as I said, you have to understand that there is no legal restrictions, validity or invalidity. The reason for international affiliations is that one, it helps you build credibility. Second, one of the affiliations that we have, which is the General Hypnotherapy Standards Council, which is in UK, is actually a value. It's a value because of all the countries that I'm aware of. UK is the only country where there are the complementary healthcare field is regulated through a self-regulatory body which has been created by the government of UK. And in order to become a part of Complementary National Healthcare Council UK, you need to be screened through certain bodies that the government has identified. General Hypnotherapy Standards Council is one such body. So if you want to go and practice in UK and if you want your practice to be insured, it's important that you are a part of CNHC, and for that you will need to be screened by GHHC or any other such approved institute. Our affiliation with GHHC allows you to become a member of GHHC and by extension of that a member of CNHC, which is Complementary National Healthcare Council. Apart from that, while we are affiliated with other international associations, there are more associations that we probably get affiliated to in the coming days, but they are more from a credibility building point of view. From a legal standpoint, they don't really hold as much of a value. And as I'm saying, it's not just for our courses, that holds true for every course across length and breadth of India and probably worldwide. There are some institutes that misrepresent certification. I want you to be careful about that. For example, I know certain institutes that claim that ours is a legal course because we are ISO certified. ISO certification has nothing to do with legality. It's a process-oriented work. But because general people don't really understand the distinction, they get away with it. So you have to be kind of careful with that. So yeah, just keep that in mind.
Sure. I'd just like to take a moment to mention that that question was from Ritika Agarwal. So thank you, Ritika, for that question. And a couple of other questions that have come in to us were actually covered by what Nitin and I were talking about. So I think we had one from, Ms. Nandini Rao on how hypnosis helps coaches. I hope our conversation has helped you a bit, and then you can look at Nitin's link about the previous webinar on coaches, and hopefully that helps you with some answers as well. So another question that came in was by Yash Chandrasekhar, and he basically wants to know about hypnotizing someone or working with someone that has strong negative energies or anger within them, as within and as expressed. So I think this is a good point to bring up in terms of very intense negative emotions and how therapists work with that. Do you want to share a little bit more about Nitin, how that specifically can be helped with?
Okay. So this will be like one application of hypnosis towards anger management. The prerequisite to work with the client is that the client should be willing. That's the prerequisite. You will not be able to work with hypnosis unless the client is really willing to go through the entire process. When I say willing to go through the entire process, it means that they are willing to sit with you, listen to you, talk to you, be engaged with you. Whether you call it hypnosis, you want to call it some other name, that's okay. But the client needs to be there because they see value in having an interaction with you. As long as that's true, you should be able to work with a client. Now, the question is, how do we work with people who have anger issues? So, see, when someone has an anger issue, there are underlying reasons which is resulting in that anger. So, as a hypnotherapist, you would work with the client to be able to identify what those underlying issues are. Some of those issues the client may be consciously aware of. Some of those issues the client may not be consciously aware of. So be able to identify those issues to be able to help the client develop the skills to address those situations. In most cases of anger, not all, but in most cases of anger, you will notice that there is something that the client is not able to accept. So bringing in that acceptance, also being able to help the client decide what they want to do with that acceptance are parts and parcel of what we are going to do with therapy. But if I have to summarize this, the idea would be to first help the client release the anger, help the client replace the anger with an alternative emotion, let's say calmness or anything else the client wants to experience. Be able to help the client learn from that particular experience. If the experience is related to certain triggers, let's say a particular person who makes you angry, then be able to change the conditioned response with that particular person. All of this will fall within the realm of hypnosis. The difference between working with hypnosis with anger and with other fields would be, in most of the fields, you expect yourself to get angry and you are prepared that how I should not get angry. In hypnosis, the idea is how do we ensure that the anger doesn't even come up with that person in the first place. So in hypnosis, you will not be asked to look at a client and then restructure your thought while you are in front of the client, or while you are in front of the person who triggers an anger in you. We will also not tell you to count 10 down to 0 while you are in front of that person, because we understand that once that anger triggers, a lot of these things become difficult. The idea is to work with you in a therapy in a way in which when you are in front of that person, the anger doesn't even come. And that's very unique about hypnosis. I'm not aware of any other field of therapy which will actually work in that formula. So yeah, that's one of the ways in which you will work with anger. But the exact process will depend upon the facts of the case.
Sure. Thank you for that, Nitin. And we'll take two more questions, the latter being about another emotion that's commonly addressed, which is fear. But before I get to that, Dhwani Jaishar asks a very interesting question, and this is about how frequently should the client be hypnotized, now I'm guessing attending sessions with hypnosis, to attain a sustainable change. So I think this is a very common question we get as practitioners, is how many sessions is it going to take? So do you want to have a go at answering that?
So the number of sessions purely depend upon the consumer you're working with, and the skills of the therapist, and what is your mental state as a client. Okay? So it's a combination of these three factors. So I can't give you an exact figure, but what I can tell you is mostly 8 sessions is more or less good enough. It's very rare for a hypnotherapist to have to go beyond those 8 sessions, except if you're working with cases where other mental health practitioners are involved, which means if let's say you're working with a client who is also going to psychiatry, then a major part of what you will do with the client will depend upon your interaction with the psychiatrist and how the psychiatrist is planning to work with the patient. That because it's a joint work between you and the psychiatrist, the number of sessions may vary depending upon the input and the feedback of the psychiatrist. Similarly, if you're working with a physical issue, let's say you're working with pain management, okay, or you're working with someone who has a chronic illness and you're trying to help the client work with that illness, then you will also be working with a medical practitioner. So depending upon what the medical practitioner is planning to do and how you can complement the medical practitioner would actually determine the number of sessions that you would require. Apart from this, 8 sessions generally is enough. There are places where you would suggest please don't use hypnosis only.
Yeah.
For example, if you are working with clients who have any of these disorders where there are hallucinations.
Yeah.
Okay. Hypnosis is not the only process that you will use. In fact, hypnosis will not even be the first technique to use.
Right.
If you are going to use hypnosis, you will only use it in combination with what the psychiatrist is doing and based on the guidance that the psychiatrist gives you. Apart from that, probably 8 sessions is good enough, but 8 is generally the upper limit.
Yeah.
With phobias, for example, generally 1 or 2 sessions are more than enough.
Correct.
Okay. I work with clients where there's been general anxiety, and general anxiety 4 sessions give them observable, quantifiable changes, results. We may still take a couple of more sessions to see that there is anything underlying which is left and to address that, but then 4 to 6 sessions becomes more or less enough for that. And in some cases up to 8 sessions, maybe just to be on the safer side, I will say 8 sessions plus to minus 2 is what you have to keep in mind.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, this question did ask about sustainable change, and we are referring to these number of sessions specifically directed to sustainable change, like Nathan mentioned as well when it comes to fears and phobias, which interestingly two of our viewers have asked questions about. One is around fear in and of itself and how hypnosis can be used with it, and the other one was a bit more specific that has just come in from Rima Lokesh about using hypnosis towards subjects, educational subjects, like for kids, for example, the fear of math. So hypnosis in and of itself, using specific techniques, can address fears and phobias effectively. You want to give 2-liners about that before we sort of close for today?
When we talk about fears, clients generally have a logical reasoning why they have a fear, and there's a stored fear. So with hypnosis, you can work with the stored fear, and then you can combine it with another, let's say, cognitive therapy, to be able to help them address the rationales because of which they feel the fear is justified. That will become probably a combination approach. When we talk about phobias, on the other hand, phobias are more unconscious. People who have phobias consciously know that most of those phobias are ridiculous, but yet they are not able to overcome it. Hypnosis, NLP are incredibly effective to help people get over phobias. There is an NLP process called Fast Phobia Cure, which is basically a hypnotic process structured in a particular way. Highly effective, generally a 1-session work that we look at. In the earlier question, there was also a point where we were asked that what would be the frequency of sessions. So generally, when you go to a hypnotherapist, they would ask you to come once a week. An average session would be anywhere between 1 hour to 2 hours, but we would generally ask you to plan for 2 hours, just in case the session is extending. It's generally once a week, and in between there would be a longer gap that will be given to you. The gaps are there because we just don't want to keep working with you without realizing what the results are. We want you to come for a session, go back, notice the changes in your life. Those changes then determine what we do in the next session. So even from a therapist point of view, as a therapist, please keep this in mind. It's not that can I just do 6 sessions with a client back to back every day. It's generally not a good idea. If you're looking at sustainable change, you need feedback from the client in terms of what's changing in their real life. 1 session per week is generally good enough, except where you're using specific techniques where you may want the client to come for a back-to-back session. But that will only be in a couple of that will only be a case for a couple of techniques, not for all techniques. Generally, once a session is what we look for.
Yeah, that's correct. And
also, you asked about application of it
for fears, basically.
For fears. So, let's say fears I have already explained. As far as specific fears, let's say education is concerned. See, there are 2 parts when you're working with kids. There is one, the child's conceptual understanding. Can hypnosis help kids get conceptual clarity? Hypnosis can help kids get into a learning state where it's easier for them to learn. They would still need to learn what they need to learn, but yes, to be able to get into that state where they're able to focus, concentrate, are not afraid of the subject, can be done with the help of hypnosis. And then it's the skill set of the teacher who's teaching the child to be able to help the child learn those concepts and learn those techniques. As far as fears are concerned, hypnosis can be very effective in helping kids address fears related to subjects. But I'm just clarifying, it's not just about fear. When a child says, I'm afraid of maths, there are two things that are happening. The child may lack the skills to be able to solve the math sums, and that lack of skills has eventually led to fear. So while with hypnosis, you will help the child work with that fear. You will help the child get into a state of focus and concentration so that probably they are in a more receptive state to learn. The actual techniques of learning will still need to be addressed for the child. Okay? And that's where the role of the teacher becomes extremely important. Interestingly, that's also one of the applications of hypnosis. So while we've discussed application of hypnosis in coaching and therapy, teaching and training is another area where hypnosis can be very effectively applied.
True. In fact, having worked in prior in a schooling setting, I feel like it's been sort of very helpful for teachers, in fact, to learn the basics of how to work with children who are in a highly stressful state, and to motivate them accordingly in the right environment so that they're able to be more receptive to their subjects. So with that, I think we've covered as much as we could in terms of questions. I hope we have answered some of your questions. Do go back, listen up to the rest of the talk, and I think our conversation should be able to help the queries that you have. Along the way, if you feel you've had more questions that have popped onto your mind after listening to us talk, please feel free to drop them in the comments below, and myself would be happy to go in and answer any more questions that you might have. Feel free to connect with ICHARS if you're looking to understand a bit more about training and how you can learn how to use hypnosis as a part of whatever field of practice you may be in. And I can be found at My Wellness Therapy, and if you're interested to come and experience what hypnosis is like with either of us, feel free to reach out and we'd be more than happy to journey with you. So that will be all for our webinar today.
So maybe just a couple of things to add to that. We are going to add a couple of links in the comment box. One will be to Nisha's website, where you can actually go and check out the work that she's doing. I'll also add a link to our courses, where the course, which is application of hypnosis and NLP coaching towards coaching practices, and then there would be an alternate link which will be towards therapy sessions and therapy practices. So if you are a therapist, please check out the therapist course. If you are a coach or looking at becoming a coach, please check out the coach certification program. If you have any questions that Nisha has said, please feel free to ask us those questions. What we've covered is probably the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more to what hypnosis is. On the ICHARS website, you will find a lot of articles, a lot of blogs that you can check out. We'll be doing more webinars and more sessions in future. If you have any questions we have not addressed, we will surely take up those questions at the next set of webinars. Even the course that I've talked about, the course is a lot more than hypnosis. Hypnosis is only one part of the course. While obviously the base is hypnosis in terms of everything that we do. The name of the institute kind of suggests that. But we incorporate a lot of techniques and practices into those particular courses. So please do check out those courses and feel free to get in touch with us and connect with us.
I think we have one or two questions and follow-ups that are popping through, but Nitin and I will be able to just continue to take that with you offline.
You can actually ask those questions so we can probably address that quickly.
Sure. Okay, so we just had a follow-up to, in fact, the fear of maths question, and I think the person asking, Ms. Rima, has clarified that the block exists with the fear of not getting the desired marks through the concepts and skills that are already in place. And the child does well at home, but gets nervous during exam. So this is interesting, which is about exam fears and exam anxiety. So do you want to get a take on that?
Brilliant. So hypnosis is probably the tool that you're looking for.
Yeah.
We have actually spoken to a lot of parents, kids, and even coaching centers where they have told us that we have kids who do extremely well in the class. In their mock tests, in their prelims, they are brilliant. But something goes wrong in the final exams. They just blank out, they just forget. Please ask them to go in with a hypnotherapist. That's all I can tell you, because it's extremely effective. In fact, if you have a coaching center And if you have a lot of kids like this, I would actually suggest go and connect with a hypnotherapist who can come and help and address problems for those kids. You will be amazed at the results that kids can get. Some of those kids are brilliant. It's just that they blank out, they get nervous, and that's the reason why they are facing that problem. So hypnosis can really be useful for them.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are hypnotherapists, this is a good line of work to set up a practice. Please go connect with a coaching center. Tell them that this is what you can do for them. Give them a couple of demo sessions, and you, if you have not done this with kids, you will be amazed with the results. The coaching center is going to be blown away with it. You will have a regular flow of clients coming from the coaching center.
And in fact, even with my experience with schools, who I come from Singapore, so sometimes they're a bit strict about the kind of techniques you can use. But when I chatted to the teachers and the trainers over there, especially like this for kids who are struggling with exam fears, just using simple positive visualizations, which is a common technique in hypnosis, created wonders. So, do not be hesitant. In fact, if you're parents or if you're teachers who are interested to know a bit more about this subject, then do connect with us. And you can find out more as well on how you can go ahead and help these children. So yeah, I think that was all today from our thank you, Rima, for the response. I hope we adequately answered that, and we look forward to connecting with you again soon. And that is me, Nisha, and Nipin signing off today for the webinar with you.
Thank you.